and this is the Wellness Watch.
Time for the Wellness Watch and Black Doctors Speak podcast with your host, Dr. Michael LeNoir, and co-host, Mr. Ellis Dean. Our special guest today is Dr. Cherie Franklin. Today's segment, Growing Old Gracefully.
Dr. Cherie Franklin, she has a PhD in kinesiology, nutrition, and rehabilitation, and that is a whole bunch of fancy words to say she knows what she's talking about. Okay, so welcome, Dr. Franklin. How are you this evening?
I am good. Very glad to be with you both.
So, first question out the gate is what exactly is successful aging?
There are so many different ways you can coin successful aging. So I'm going to start with a very, it's a concept that successful aging, if you're in a research sector, that is really, really popular. It's Dr. Rowan Kahn, and they really coined it very generic. You've probably heard it before, but being free from disability and disease, right? You've probably heard that. That's something that would almost go as healthy aging, having high cognitive and physical abilities. So thinking well and acting well physically, and interacting with others in meaningful ways. That's what's coined successful aging. But I like to take that a step further and really define successful aging in the way of what is called health span versus your lifespan. So we have a lifespan, right? Everyone has a certain defined number of years they're going to live. And that's not really under our control per se. Even if we do everything quote unquote right, something can happen that shortens our lifespan. But there's also the concept of health span. And so this is really the number of years of your life, no matter how short or long your life is, the number of years that you're healthy for the most part. So if you think in terms of successful aging, think in terms of really increasing that health span, the number of years you're generally healthy, no matter how long you live. And honestly, I know that the doctor started off saying, this is something that we're going to talk to our parents about, but I like to challenge and say, this is something that we should be thinking about because we're all aging. We're all aging from the time we're born. And so I want everyone to listen, even if you don't feel like you're aging, and know that just like flowers, from the time we're born, from the time we get here, we are aging. And so let's just keep that in mind.
Well, I think that's probably a good way to start, and I think that redefining it as a issue for everyone from the cradle to the grave is probably a good way to look at it.
Absolutely. And you have to think about it now, especially as a pediatrician, that the diseases that we were once calling adult onset diseases, i.e. type 2 diabetes, these diseases are now becoming child and adolescent diseases. And, if we're talking in the term of health span, if, we have a 16-year-old who has type 2 diabetes, which we do, you're talking about someone who is already putting a dent in that health span before they even make it to be an official adult.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good place to start. If you look at my waiting room, you see a bunch of bowling balls. I mean, these kids are bigger than they have ever been. Certainly the pandemic did not help that, but we have had to institute a number of screening studies that in the past were for adults. Cholesterol, diabetes, looking for things like that, simply because the things have changed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think the thing that saddens me the most is even working with children. As a health coach, I've actually worked with children. And believe it or not, the biggest resistance comes from the parents, not the kids. Kids are like sponges. If you guide them in the right direction, for a long time, I actually said I wasn't going to work with adults anymore because kids are truly like sponges. When you reach them at an early enough age, you can change those habits for the better. I was an obese adolescent. I was about 65, almost 70 pounds overweight when I was 14. From 12 to 14, I should say. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I'm so committed to what I do is it's something life-changing that happened to me at a very young age, and it stuck. And we all know that the older you get, the tougher it gets to break those habits. And so really, again, in speaking of successful aging and really in relation to that health span, we really have to think about that, because I totally agree. Cholesterol levels are high in people that are way too young.
Yeah,
So
one of the things we tell parents, stop and let this, because it really is very frustrating as a pediatrician. Parents talk about, well, I want my children to eat healthy. And then you go to McDonald's and you
Right.
see a bunch of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Now, a 4-year-old cannot drive to McDonald's. A 5-year-old can drive to McDonald's. Yet,
That's
if you
right.
go to these fast food restaurants, they are full of little children. And that really is where this aging process starts.
Yes, yes. I remember when I was in LA, and I went to, I was out of curiosity, I went to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, only because everyone was
Out
talking
of
about
it's
it.
curiosity.
delicious.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity.
Let me tell you something. I make better fried chicken than that. I might get beat by somebody from LA, but I make better fried chicken than that when I do make it. I do make fried chicken. But I went there, and I remember there was a young lady in there, and she had her daughter. Her daughter was no more than 10 years old. And as soon as she got, her chicken and waffles, okay, she put syrup on it. Okay, you're going to put syrup. She put a lot on it, and I just couldn't help but watch. But then she took the salt shaker and just started shaking it on the chicken. And I was
Yeah.
looking like, that little girl didn't ask for salt. Who introduced her to that salt? Who told her, that salt makes things taste better? And I'm one of these people that I always reinforce with my own sons. Taste something before you season it. See if it needs anything. Oftentimes it doesn't, especially when it's in some sort of fast food chain or anywhere. Most of the time, you don't need anything extra on it. But the
Right.
fact that that parent was introducing that behavior to that child, and again, she's under 10, so now she's going to think that everything is supposed to taste that way. And as she gets older, again, those habits are going to become much more difficult to break.
So that was my next question. We keep talking about the younger, because we're talking about successful aging, and when we
Yes.
hear the title, we automatically start thinking AARP, right?
Exactly.
What we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
The way they do it, they send you
I don't have my card yet, but I think the point that Dr. Franklin is making is our habits are developed when we're young. Our habits are handed to us in part or shaped by our parents.
Yeah.
And so if our parents are taking us to McDonald's where those fries are, even though they are very delicious, have a lot of sodium, and the burgers have a lot of sodium, and the drinks have a lot of sugar.
Yes,
that shapes our palate, and then that's what we start searching and looking for as we get older. So when I ate a lot of hot wings in college, I'm still trying to fight that urge to go get some hot wings now, because it is shaped how I eat and how I live. And so what Dr. Franklin, and I want to put words in your mouth, so this is kind of a statement / question. I think what Dr. Franklin is saying is this: we have the power to shape our palates. We have the power to shape our children's palates.
Yes,
and if
we
can do that earlier, to where we don't need as much salt, we don't need as much sugar, we're looking for fresh fruits and vegetables, naturally sweetened items, then we'll have a better chance to age successfully.
Exactly. And it starts young, but I also want to emphasize that you can start aging successfully at any time. That curve, I almost wish I could put on my academic hat and draw a picture, but I'll try to describe it here. That curve, you almost look at it as health span being like a curve, right? And at any point in time, you have a curve that does that. We're all going to kind of go up and we're going to go down. We're all going to deteriorate. When you get to the point that you're changing a behavior, you scoot that curve over just a little bit in your favor every time.
Gotcha.
So even if you have a disease, let's say you have type 2 diabetes, let's say you're 21. That doesn't mean you say, oh, shoot, I'm going to be on insulin. That's it. No. You still have the power to change those behaviors. Now, I'm going to clear up a myth. I am sure my doctor here, he can agree, but you can't cure some of these diseases regardless of what you hear, especially diabetes. I hear that so much. I cured my diabetes. You can't cure diabetes. You can treat it, you can manage it, but you can't cure it. But you can change those behaviors to the point that that insulin that you may have needed, you don't need. You know, you can change your behaviors by moving more, which is another big one in successful aging, even though we kind of kicked it off with nutrition. You can also change it by moving more. As a matter of fact, exercise, a lot of people don't even know, exercise has insulin-like effects. So the same way you eat that meal and take that insulin shot, if you instead go for a walk, that could negate the need for that insulin shot. Am I right? I know I'm right, but I want you to agree with me.
I'd be a little afraid to disagree, but I think there's so much stuff, and I don't want to maximize the conversation. But I have heard a couple of things that I think are really important. Mm-hmm. If you stop smoking a cigarette right now, it increases your lifespan 2 years. But if you just stop today, you stop for 10 years, you're baseline. And I've interviewed people who talked about aging, and they say the most important thing about aging is keeping your legs. Keeping your legs in good shape.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And listen, when I tell you the moving aspect, a lot of times, and I want to start by saying, aside from the fact that the beginning of my studies as a researcher were successful aging, my very first publication was Successful Aging. But I trained people for years, for well over 20 years. I'd say the beginning of my career, I was a trainer. And the youngest client that I had was 55. And my oldest client was 103 when she died. She didn't die from exercise. She died peacefully in her sleep. But we were actually in the pool working out the day she died, the morning she died, before that evening. And so what I noticed with them is how much progress they made at those ages. And you know what? The progress was so meaningful to them at that age because it was something that they couldn't believe could actually happen. And I really want to emphasize that with movement, because one of the biggest sources of resistance that I get when I have clients that are older is they say, well, I'm not trying to, fit in a bikini. I'm old. Or I'm not trying to do this, that, and the other. I'm old. I'm not trying to get my summer bod. I'm old. But the thing is, as we age, working out is so much less about how you look and really about how you feel. You can't function if your body isn't moving. Humans were made to move, and that's at any age. And you can't function at all if you're not moving. And moving doesn't just mean walking. A lot of times I talk to older folks and I say, are you training with resistance? And they're like, weight training? No, weight training is actually more important, especially with women. Weight training is just as important, if not a little more important than, traditional cardio exercises as we get older, because now we're talking about putting that weight bearing exercise on our bones. We're talking about developing muscle, which deteriorates very rapidly when you age. And let me drop a little nugget of wisdom. It actually starts deteriorating when you're 30.
Oh, wait a minute. Back that up. Put a plug on that.
Hit
it in reverse. Say that again. It starts deteriorating when?
Yes, your muscle will start to deteriorate. If without any intervention, right? Your muscle will start to deteriorate at 30. And if you think about it, there's something that coincides. That person who was always able to never exercise or do anything, suddenly that person is becoming kind of flabby. And they're like, what happened? Well, that's a combination of deteriorating muscle and deteriorating metabolism, which is directly linked to the muscle you have.
Right.
So the more muscle you have, the higher your metabolic rate.
Well, one question that always comes up is how much exercise is enough? I've seen studies that show that 11 minutes of very serious exercise, and 35 minutes is kind of the key point. But how much exercise? And then people say, well, you got to do 160 minutes every week. I don't have 160 minutes to do anything every week. But what's a regular? What would be a good figure for people to shoot for when they start talking about exercise? And what
150 minutes a week.
So that's what they start talking about. They start talking about that. Well, I'm asking you, They really do.
Look, I'm going to elaborate on that because that 150 minutes doesn't do much if you don't know what to do, right? So, 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity. And by moderate intensity activity, we mean walking a little faster than you normally walk. And I have to really emphasize that because I hear a lot of people say, I walk all the time. Well, the average person normally walks at a leisure pace of about 2 miles per hour. So just use that as a number. At a leisure pace, that's you just walking through the mall, walking down the street. That's a 2 mile an hour pace, right? When you exercise at a moderate intensity, take it to 3 miles per hour. So that's the difference in intensity. So if you're thinking that 150 minutes means that you have to go and do a HIIT class or step aerobics or jump in Zumba even, that's not necessarily true. What you have to do is just push your body beyond what it normally does. It doesn't always mean a whole lot of sweat, but it does mean that you have to do a little bit more than you do at your leisure pace. That's with walking. So that can mean a bike ride that's a little faster. Doing laps, if you like to swim, lap swimming versus just doing a leisure, kind of chilling in the water swim. So that's what we really mean by 150 minutes a week. And I also want to emphasize, especially as people age, it doesn't have to be, that number is scary in and of itself, right? 150 minutes a week. Immediately you're like, I don't have all of that, right? That's 30 minutes a day, but it doesn't have to even be 30 minutes at the same time. I've known many people, I've recommended that a lot of people take a 10-minute walk in the morning, a 10-minute walk in the afternoon, and a 10-minute walk after dinner, right? 10-minute walk after dinner because of that insulin-like effect, right? Instead of eat for a walk. And what that does is get you towards that 150 minutes. Again, so long as you're doing that above what you normally do. In the case of walking, we mean at a faster pace. And again, I also want to emphasize that within that 150 minutes, weight training can be in there too. So that doesn't mean 150 minutes of cardio plus weight training. If you do 150 minutes, you put 30 minutes, one of those days could be weight training. 2 out of 5 of those days could be weight training. And that can count towards your activity because what are you doing? You are increasing the amount of activity that you normally do when you lift weights.
Well, I want to go back to talking about the whole legs thing because I think that's important. I saw a video, and it was from a personal trainer, and it really talked about it was like a stand up test, right? And it basically what you do if you're sitting on the ground. What does it take for you to be able to stand up? And if you can stand up without touching the ground, where you could just use your legs, do you have to put one hand down? Do you have to put two hands down? Are you using an object to help you stand up? And what she was saying, what I saw in the video was they track the easier it is for you to stand up, the better your outcome are with regards to your, being able to physically move and perform at a later age. So could you kind of expand on how those legs and how that is really important later on in life, and maybe some ways that we can strengthen our hips and legs to be able to move at a later age?
Again, yes, that's a strength thing. That would be a strength thing, which a lot of people start lacking because, again, they're not doing that resistance exercise. So resistance exercise, that's a functional exercise, and that's a very popular functional method that's used a lot in physical therapy to see how people are with their activities of daily living, because we do sit and stand a lot in our normal activities of daily living. So what I want you to also understand as we're talking about legs is actually that legs are limbs, and limbs are just I call limbs go with the ride. What you really have to focus on if you're going to get any kind of strength is your core training. And that comes first. So when I get someone who is extremely out of shape, the general notion is put them on the treadmill and start them to working out. Well, what generally happens and I'm putting my trainer's hat on when I used to train a lot, what generally happens first is I do basic functional exercises like the one you described. Can they do one push-up? Can they do a plank? And I'm talking one. Can they do a squat with their own normal body weight? And these are exercises that are functional exercises, but they're also highly contingent on your core strength. And core
Right.
strength is something that we develop, I should say we often ignore, but core strength can be developed with any sort of weightlifting exercise. And I want to say something here, not just lifting with weights, metal, physical, free weights, but we're talking about resistance bands. We're talking
Mhm.
about machines. Any of these exercises, I would say machines if you're not able to use more freestanding exercises, because the more you rely on machines, the less you're relying on your core, and that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Right.
So what? Go ahead.
No, I'm just
What you got?
saying, I want to reintroduce you, Dr. Nina Cherie Franklin. You're a
Okay.
doctor in kinesiology. We got a few questions out there.
Okay.
Mr. Dean, you think you and I got so interested, me trying to figure out, you trying not to get in my. So can we?
It's more comments that we have that are people are really agreeing
Yes.
with Dr. Franklin. So like somebody, Tina says her my physical medicine and rehab doctor told her the same thing about the 30-minute walks, 10, 10, and 10. And
Hmm.
she shared that info with her mother. So that was a great job of not only just taking that knowledge, but passing it on and paying it forward.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Walking, somebody, Irene says walking is her favorite exercise. She can walk
Yes.
4 miles in a little over an hour. And so
Excellent.
that's
Excellent.
that brisk walking.
That's exactly.
That's a borderline run right there. If you
That
can,
is, that is, that's a run for some of those people that chuck away a little bit, who are saying they're running. That's a good run. That's a good walk. That's a very good walk. Congrats.
that's a great walk.
Well, we don't
Some
have any questions. We don't have any questions about what we talked about. There's so
Uh-huh.
much to ask, and we have so little time. Why don't we move to some of the other factors that influence
Yes.
how we age? Not just
Yes.
exercise and diet, but what some
Yes.
of the factors that people may not think about.
You know what? I really have to emphasize this one, and it's our mental health. And now more than ever before, we're all talking about our mental health. And I often say this. We had a conversation in another talk, and with Alice, I was on another show, and there was an emphasis on your
Yeah.
mental health being intact before you could do anything, let alone age successfully. And really, we're talking about mental from the standpoint of you being, we're talking from the standpoint of you being able to feel confident about your abilities, you being able to feel confident about the aging process itself. One of the, I had a client before, and one of the parts that was bothering him the most about aging was a lack of acceptance that he was going to die one day.
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's
believe it
hard.
or not,
It's hard to
it's
do
something
that.
to think about, right? And it actually put him in a situation where he was almost dipping into a borderline depression because he was so focused on death. And this was at the age of 65. He began to be so focused on death that he stopped living life. And so you
Right.
have to think about that. And I say that because some people are doing that younger than 65. And so mental health is very critical in that equation. I also want to bring up other things because really all of this stuff, there's overlap. Everything is kind of intertwined. You have your financial health, your financial wellness. That's something that influences it. So you're in a situation where you don't have any money or you're insecure about, your ability to thrive
Right.
financially. You are going to have problems eating right. The last thing you're doing is thinking about eating nutritious foods when you don't have any money to even buy basic foods for nutrition. And
Right.
I emphasize that one because my mother, she lives in I grew up in Inglewood on the south side of Chicago. And if you know anything about Chicago, everything on TV about Chicago is usually Inglewood. And in that area, it was very difficult to talk to people about eating well and exercising because that financial insecurity was influencing their mental health, which ultimately influenced everything else they did. And so when we're thinking about mental health, or when we're even trying or thinking about successful aging and even trying to help people, and this goes to a lot of our primary care physicians and our physicians in general, how are we talking to these people in ways that encourage them regardless of their circumstances? How are we talking to people to reach them and emphasize that importance, but also addressing some of those other factors that can play a role, social being another one. And that social is something that we touched on before in speaking with the kids. Your relationships dictate your behaviors. They dictate your behaviors, and they are almost more than you would know. If you have a spouse or a partner who is not engaging in behaviors that go towards aging successfully, you're going to have a problem there, because their behaviors are going to start influencing yours. The same thing can happen with friends. So
I think
those are some of the many factors.
what you're referring to is what we call and all in that big bucket called social determinants of health, right? So
That's right. I didn't want to get too technical, but we got that. Okay.
Yes. But that's a big term that I learned, here recently. So I had to drop it out there, but in all seriousness, it's all about the social determinants of health. And so those things are, we're talking about our financial health, we're talking about our mental health, we're talking about our relationship health, we're talking about our spiritual health, all of those things. And we're talking about environmental factors that can affect how we can, do we live in a neighborhood or in an area that is safe to go outside and walk?
Exactly.
Are we living closer to a grocery store or a market that has fresh fruits and vegetables for us? Can we afford fresh fruits and vegetables? Because we know those turn over a lot quicker. Do we have time? Are we working so much that we don't have time to cook fresh meals every night? And that's why we're eating out more often.
Yeah.
And so all of those things go into the context of your health and wellness profile. Right. And that's why Dr. Nina, Dr. Franklin really works with our clients in terms of developing an entire health profile, so we can get you on your wellness journey where you are based on your context and not based on just pie in the sky. You need to be eating more fruits and vegetables and then walk away, because that means that's a lot that goes into that statement of eat more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. Can I ask that another way? A lot of people plan to retire, but so few people plan for retirement. That means I got a lot of my friends always ask me, Dr. LeNoir, when you going to retire? And all they do is calling me all day long because they don't have nothing. But I've seen people deteriorate so quickly if they haven't planned for retirement. They plan to retire 65, but then they don't know what they're going to do with the rest of their life.
I am so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad you did, because you know what? Seriously, no. So there's a theory in successful aging called role theory. It's called role theory, right? And so we have roles. We have many roles in life. I'm a mother. I'm a health coach. I'm a professional. I'm a blogger. I'm a exercise enthusiast. We all have these different roles in life, not just our jobs, right? And not just being a parent. The issue that comes not just in retirement but in aging in general is what happens. We've defined ourselves as being parents. Now the kids are gone, right? That's a role diminished. We've defined ourselves as workers, right? Whenever occupation or career we're in, we no longer have that because we retired. So all of these roles that we had before, which unfortunately a lot of them are limited. If you're just talking about parent and career, when you retire and you get out older and the kids are gone, you have no roles. And that theory is actually said to be the difference between people aging successfully and not. And that's because they haven't defined different roles to take on. So I have one of my successful aging friends that I know. She's retired probably 10 years now. This woman does so much more than she did when she had a job, but all the way down to, going to exercise at the gym, taking an aerobics class in the morning. So that's her role. She takes a water aerobics class every morning. She's expected to be there because she's in a group fitness class, right? She holds babies at the nursery, in a pediatrics unit. She holds babies and rocks babies. That's a role she's taken on, a motherly role. She gets out and she does these things. So what she's getting is something social. She's getting a little bit of money with her efforts of, holding the baby. She has volunteering efforts that she puts in, and she's putting in that social element along with the exercise. right? So all these roles she's picked up instead of just calling people on the telephone all the time, right? And now suddenly, even though we're not looking at necessarily how she eats or, even though she's physically active, we're not looking at that either. We're looking at the intertwining of all those things together to
Right.
define a successful ager. I remember when I first published my article, Successful Aging, I actually co-authored it with a woman who was my mentor at the time, and she was in her 60s. And I was 25. And she said, when I started, I said, this is going to be something easy to write. Exercise, eat right, the end. And she was like, so you think that this is all about exercising and eating right? And I was like, of course, that's how you age successfully, the end. And she said, kind of like what you said, Ellis, almost like live. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. And as I got older, personally, I realized there's so much more in life than exercise and eating right. Now, again, because this has been my life, kinesiology, nutrition, and rehabilitation, right? These are my roles. I'm like, well, what's outside of these roles?
Right.
And in many ways, that social element, I would dare say, if with the people that I work with that were older, that social element was actually more important than both.
Yes.
It's not that that you should be social and eat poorly and not exercise, but that social element can dictate a lot of what you do in age. Think about, the stereotypical, what we call big mama sometimes, right?
Right.
Big mama had people around her all the time. Our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, they had people around them all the time. They cooked these big meals, and the meals weren't always good, but these people were always around them. Some big mamas lived until they were 100, in spite of what they ate. Some didn't. Right. But if you think about that social component, and also think about the fact that what's the first thing that generally happens when big mama gets older? If she transitions to a nursing home or a setting like that, she generally doesn't live very long. So think about that.
So I think you're making a great point, because I'm thinking about my own parents, and it's like a tale of two parents, right? So I've got my mother, who is she's been retired for years, but is very connected socially, still goes out to functions, events, volunteers, walks, very, very active, very, very spry. Then I got my father, who has really, after his post-retirement, has really kind of just sits and watches CNN all day. And when you look at them now, they look like they're 15 years difference in terms of age, just because of the activities that she has chosen to continue to do, to have those roles continue on, versus him just kind of restricting his activities, limiting his activities, and that has aged him much faster than he needed to be. I do have one more question, because we're coming up, towards the end of the show. So we do have a question that says, okay, for those of us, not us, for those people that are 50 and up, okay, let's say like the first half, we're gonna assume everybody's living to 100. The first half, they haven't done what they were supposed to do in terms of developing those habits that we talked about earlier in this program. What can someone do at 50 and up to start this process of aging successfully? And can they, in a way, and I know you touched on a little bit earlier, can they in a way start reversing that aging process, or slowing it down at least?
Absolutely. And the first thing that I would say, and I emphasize it's already been said, but start today, start tomorrow. You can start by implementing that simple strategy. If you're not exercising now, go ahead and implement that strategy of going for those walks. Start with that 10 minutes 3 times a day, and that will shift that curve. I mean, it could shift that curve dramatically. So just the simple act of walking every day can improve your cardiovascular profile. That's your heart health, your metabolic profile, reduce your risk of diabetes. If you already have a condition like diabetes, it can help you manage it better. Same thing with hypertension and all the other diseases. Just the simple act of moving. That minimum of 150 minutes a week did not come out of the air. That was actually research proven to work. And I would also say really focus on doing some functional exercises. If you don't know a lot about weight training, I'm not going to go prescribing, weight training programs for you. But right now you're on the internet. The same way you're on the internet, you check out YouTube and look at some exercises with tubing equipment. Exercises you can do at home without equipment, and incorporate full body weight training. That's working your legs, your arms, your chest, your back, some sort of full body resistance activity at least 2 days a week. That will shift your curve dramatically, improve your bone strength, improve your muscle health, and even put a little boost in your metabolism. If you're trying to lose weight,
Right.
Your mental health, you can get that under control at any time. Again, even the act of asking that question is mentally healthy, because what you've done is said, you know what, I can do this, and you can do this. So really thinking about that from a mental health standpoint as well. And you can do that at any age.
I think we'd be remiss, though, if we didn't mention what we need to do as every time I review the literature for a variety of different things, it shows that African Americans are sicker in many instances simply because they get too late into the healthcare system. So I want to emphasize that getting your regular screens, going to your regular checkups, understanding what you're supposed to be doing from a total surveillance perspective, knowing your numbers, PSAs, and cholesterol, that's just as important as to whether you age healthy or not.
That should have been number one. That can be number one. Because honestly, that can be number one.
I didn't want to say that.
No, that should be number one. Because honestly, before you go, so let me X that. Don't start tomorrow. Make your doctor's appointment first, because you need to make that doctor's appointment. Right. And not just that, you need to determine if what physical activity is right for you. Because if you have a pre-existing condition that you don't know about, i.e. a pre-existing heart condition that you don't know about, exercising, you may have limitations. So you want to get those baseline measurements. Thank you so much for correcting me. So let me tell you what the deal is. We have the illness paradigm, right? We have the disease paradigm, and we have the wellness paradigm. And whenever I'm with a physician, I always go wellness. So thank you for saying that, because yes, that absolutely needs to be first. And another reason it needs to be first is because from a simple act of goal setting, it gives you something to shoot for. So if you have some numbers that need to be improved, that's a reason to go out and do something. That's something that you can drive. You can say, I want to improve my cholesterol. Start with that goal, and that will actually drive those behaviors a lot more than not knowing that information at all.
Yeah, and we do have some of those parameters on the African American Wellness site. The number you need to do and the periodic visits you need to make. And that was not a correction, doctor. That was a contribution.
No, I know. That's why we're here together. And that's why we're here together. And I appreciate
Can I make a contribution?
Go ahead.
Right. So this right here, this is my book, right? This is a small journal, and I write everything. I write my thoughts down here. I write, if I come up with an idea, I write it down, because if it's I'll forget it, right? So, but when we're talking about setting health goals, if we're talking about, if we've got hypertension, you're taking your own blood pressure, which I do suggest doing, get your blood pressure machine, write it down so you can track your blood pressure over time, 3 or 4 times a day. So when you go to your doctor and you say, well, doc, I noticed over time my blood pressure has gone down, or I noticed over time it plateaued here. What are some things I could be doing to help bring that down? If you don't know, if you're using those 3-month doctor visits, that 6 months, that 12-month doctor visit as just to set your baseline, you're doing yourself a disservice. Write it down, track it. You are in the driver's seat of your own health and wellness journey, not your doctor. Your doctor helps you, is there for advice, but you are in the driver's seat of your health and wellness journey. You have to drive.
And you know what? Just to emphasize that point, I did a presentation where I started off with like a slide where I asked people about, health behaviors. And it was like, what's the contributors or the determinants, right, of our health? What's playing a role at this point? And do you know that medicine really only plays about a 10% role? And really, and I'm not talking about taking medicine, I'm talking about going to see your primary care physician, et cetera. And the reason it does is, if you think about that, what can they do? What can they do in that little amount of time? with those patient loads and being stressed
Right.
out by third-party payers, which is another story. What can they do in that little amount of time to help you? And it turns out that our behaviors, our own health behaviors, plays a 40% role. That's a large role. So
Right.
40%, and it actually, the newest research, and then it's actually a study I published about a few years ago, 40 to 50% of your life, and that's at any time, we're talking about that health span, is contingent on what you do. And 5 factors: what you eat, how you move, whether or not you smoke, whether or not your mental health is intact / social, and whether you're abusing alcohol or not. Did I get all 5?
4 out of 5.
I got all 5. That was 4 out of 5. That was 4 out of 5.
I got 4 out of the 5.
Oh, and the other, no, I'm sorry.
How much alcohol is too? How much alcohol is too much? We're trying to decide how much alcohol is too much alcohol.
Okay.
We don't have a number just yet. We're in the experimental phase.
We don't. And to be honest with you, it depends on so many factors. It's the how much alcohol factor, but you also have how frequently you do it, meaning, or what type and how frequently, because
Right.
drinking red wine every day does have health benefits, period. And to my whiskey and bourbon lovers, that does too. The ethanol in there has been proven to have health benefits. I'm not saying go out and have, a shot of whiskey, but there are health benefits in there. We don't want to talk about those. This is sometimes where, we get that beliefs versus what the science says. But 2 drinks per day for men and 1 drink per day. I still don't get that 1 drink for women. It's almost unfair, but 1 drink a day for women. So something equating to that.
That extra drink is for the mental health for men. We need that extra. We need that extra drink for the mental.
So I know we're running out of time,
And
but
that third drink is for racism.
But look, I know I'm running out of time, but I gotta tell you all something, because it was a study that I ran into recently, and this was all a study on white men. So a lot of the research goes in that direction, but this particular study, in the context of successful aging or healthy aging, was actually saying that the quality of life and health outcomes were improved for men who, get this, drank whiskey every evening with a cigar. Now, why is that? Not saying go smoke a cigar, but why is that? Is it the whiskey? Is it the cigar? Is it the whiskey and the cigar together? Or is it the fact that their mental health, that may have been the way they managed the stress they have? Now, once again, I am not saying go out and smoke a cigar and drink a glass of whiskey, but you have to think about that sometimes. And really in the context of having that drink. Are you having that drink because it relaxes you, or are you depending on that drink for your relaxation? That's a little different.
Context is key.
Yes.
Excellent information. I think that one of the things we do say is that you're right about the health of 10% piece, because when we go to the doctor, we're not prepared to get more than 10. So the better organized you are when you go into the healthcare system, which is something we talk about all the time, the more you get out of it. But this has just been a very excellent discussion. I think something that everyone, as many people as we can get to look at it, should hear. And you've been a very knowledgeable and entertaining guest.
Thank you.
So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dean for the last few words. But I will always say health is your biggest asset. So protect it.
Thank you for that statement. And I want to say thank you to everybody that hung with us. Tina, you are my hero. You're my new hero, Tina. Thank you so much for being with us. Everybody else, Irene, Lynn, thank you for popping in. Again, this is a wonderful discussion, but it shouldn't end here. This is the beginning. Use this discussion. Use watching this program. If you're not already on a health and wellness journey, use this as your launching pad to make that appointment, get your baselines, and set your goals. Set those personal goals on your journal, and get an accountability partner. We didn't even talk about getting an accountability partner. Make sure that's holding you accountable to those goals that you have set for yourself. Stay active, both mentally and physically. Those are the ways to age successfully. That's just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to get more from Dr. Nina, tell them how to get in contact with you.
Well, I also have a little alias that is That Salad Lady, and that's all about whole life nutrition for whole life wellness. And it's really a salad-centric approach to it. So that's how you can find me. That Salad Lady, everything. That Salad Lady on Instagram. Well, that.salad.lady on Instagram. I'm the one with more than 5 followers. And and That Salad Lady on Facebook. That Salad Lady on Twitter, and visit thatsaladlady.com. I have tons of recipes emphasizing whole life nutrition and tons of blogs emphasizing whole life wellness, and you definitely should check those out.
Well, absolutely.
Good. You have a good fried chicken recipe on there?
Stay tuned. I might have a fried chicken salad recipe for you.
Fried chicken salad. Take the salad recipe, then go to the Popeyes website and get the fried chicken. And that's how you put it all together. But again, thank you again, Dr. Franklin. Thank you, everybody that hung with us tonight. You are watching Wellness Watch here, sponsored by the African American Wellness Project, as well as in partnership with BlackDoctor.org.